know before week one. That and more this week on the couch. Very happy to be joined by Heath Cummings of CBS Sports. Heath, what do the people need to know before they set their lineups in week one?
Week one rankings are not full season rankings. No matter what order you drafted people in, they may not be ranked in the same order this week. There are players that I noticed when I finished my projections for this week. I was like, oh, that guy's a lot higher than he was when I was drafting.
Hmm. Well, so give me an example of somebody, because I know, I saw Dwayne McFarland, who's awesome, say, when you look at your projections and you see Christian McCaffrey's projection for week one, that's why he should have been number one in your draft, right? And I think you're right to point out this as a snapshot. And it's almost an exercise, right? If you look at the rankings and then you look at your week one projections where you see discrepancies, either positive or negative, we should be able to say why. Why was Christian McCaffrey not always number one? Well, because he's missed most of the games over the last 2 years. Give me an example of a player that you had to rub your eyes a little bit and say, well, is that what I'm projecting him? I guess that's what I'm projecting him.
Well, the one is the easiest to explain. It's been a roller coaster of the last month in terms of fantasy value. I'm really very pleased and happy that Brian Robinson's doing okay and going to be playing football again at some point this year. But Antonio Gibson against the Jacksonville Jaguars with J.D. McKissick and maybe one other back on the active roster this week, it's hard to see how he's not a high-end number 2 running back, if not a number 1 running back. And he'd fallen to the point where he was in round 7 or round 8 of drafts because we weren't sure he was the main third down back or the main early down back.
I think Gibson, as we've had, like you hinted at, there's been a saga with Washington's running backs going back to Robinson being drafted, and then the Commanders, through actions or either through beat writers interpreting actions, are telling us they don't really trust Antonio Gibson anymore. And then we saw a training camp. Robinson looks like the lead back. It's doing the things they wanted him to do. A rugged, no-nonsense back, not fumbling. Antonio Gibson fumbling. Antonio Gibson, the kick returner. So I guess because I'm grappling with these same things in projections too. So would you say, and I guess some of this also incorporates, what do you think about Jacksonville? What do you think about Jacksonville's defense? How excited they're going to be to play? What do you think about Carson Wentz facing Jacksonville 2 times in a row? Remember the last time we saw Wentz against Jacksonville? That was kind of fun. Well, unless you're a Colts fan, although hopefully things will get better for them. So do you think that it is cut and dry that if, let's say you had Gibson and McKissick, or you're putting together a DFS lineup and you're trying to pick Gibson or McKissick, do you think that the Commanders trust Gibson enough, or they have no choice but to trust him? I think Jonathan Williams is that other running back you're referring to who did make the team over Jarrett Patterson. I was kind of sad about that. I like Patterson. What went into weighing Gibson against McKissick other than just the guessing, which is really what all of us are doing in week one, like you started out with? Bear with us, folks. I think I have a little bit of look, while I'm waiting, hopefully, for Heath to come back, I will say that I'll give my answer to the question that I asked Heath, which was, is it clear that Antonio Gibson will be trusted? And that's what I'm not sure about. This is on a list of 100 or more questions that we're going to have going into week one, and we have to be very open to those answers, just like we're open to the return from the void. Heath, so how do you parse what we're looking at here with Washington, and whether they're forced to trust Antonio Gibson, or you think maybe Gibson is a redemption story, or maybe it's just based on thinking Washington's going to beat Jacksonville in week one?
I mean, it's a little bit of all of that. I've been a little bit skeptical of the Antonio Gibson situation, also of the Josh Jacobs situation, also of the David Montgomery. Like these situations where most of the bad news we have for the player. I mean, Gibson did fumble in a preseason game and return a kickoff, so his is a little different. But a large percentage of the news we have are beat writer reports. And you don't know, like some of the things that they've done in the Gibson camp in particular, if you were trying to motivate a player that you still believed in, those are all methods that I could see football coach Ron Rivera using to try to motivate a player. In this situation, like I'm mostly working under the assumption that Jacksonville is bad until they're not bad. I don't have any real reason to think maybe they're not as bad. Maybe they're just kind of bad. But I think it's a situation where Antonio Gibson is a favorite against a team that I don't think is very good, and his team does not have a better option, at least on early downs. And so I expect him to be pretty close to. I mean, you say workhorse back. No, J.D. McKissic's going to do a lot of things, but we know in this offensive system there are so many running back touches that J.D. McKissic can see 6 targets, and there can still be a workhorse back.
Yeah, Gibson is going to get that chance maybe that he wouldn't have gotten if events had gone differently, because it did seem like whatever they were using those to motivate Gibson, putting him on the kick return team is an action and not something you do with your clear starting running back. I don't think there's any starting running backs returning kicks. I might be wrong about that, but I don't.
I mean, we'll see about Isaiah Pacheco, but he might be the only one.
Right. He was if you checked in at a certain point, he might be the starter. And I think you're right to group those running backs together. Now, the one of these things don't belong with or don't seem like the others is Dave Montgomery and Josh Jacobs are playing under new coaches, new entire regimes. So that we're more open. I mean, everything having to do with the Bears, everything having to do with the Raiders, we should be more open to seeing something different. And I think that's probably the most important week 1 homework, right? Is let all this stuff wash over you. Don't hold on too tightly to what you thought was going to happen or the range of possibilities of what you thought was going to happen, and just receive the new information. Now, we do always have week 1 aberrations, Frisman Jackson or whatever. We always have week 1 aberrations, and we should always be asking the why and the how. But we're going to get a lot of new information. And unfortunately, I invoke Donald Rumsfeld when I say there's the known unknowns, but we have unknown unknowns. We have things that we're not even, like Elijah Mitchell and Trace Sermon or something like that, where we're not even sure. As you're stepping through, well, let me ask you, since you brought up the Washington-Jacksonville game, let's just take a step to the other side of that game, because another known unknown here is how this Jacksonville passing game is going to distribute the ball. Your first crack at projecting this offense, does someone stand out? Maybe a Christian Kirk, maybe an Evan Ingram, and how do you project this backfield in this first game under Doug Peterson?
Yeah, I think it would be even more difficult if we thought James Robinson was 100% healthy. But you have a lot of things working in different directions here. First, the massive contract they gave to Christian Kirk. That makes me think he's going to stand out above the other wide receivers as a relatively clear wide receiver 1. Then you have the Doug Peterson history, which is that a wide receiver 1 is not generally the leading target getter on his own team, right, because they throw to tight ends 30% of the time. And then you have the third kind of dynamic of that, in that the history that Travis Etienne has with his quarterback. We saw that history pay off for a lot of different duos last year. And this idea, and I don't know if it's, I'm not entirely sold on this idea that Etienne could be the Alvin Kamara type running back this year. There's some things in the passing game that he has to do better that he's not really shown us he can yet. So I've hedged a little bit, and that kind of seems to make me not be the high guy on any of these guys. I think Kirk is a boom bust number 3 wide receiver this week. Now, he could boom, and you could tell me that a month from now he's a top 20 guy every week, and that's just how we treat him. I think that's in the range of outcomes. He could just be the number 1. Evan Ingram is a number 2 tight end to have on your bench, maybe in a flex if you're in a tight end premium league. But again, if you told me Evan Ingram was a must-start top 8 tight end in a month, I would 100% believe that. Etienne is a low-end number 2 running back. I had him at RB 12 or 13 in the first run of projections when I didn't think James Robinson was going to be able to play week 1.
Right.
Now that he is, I still don't think he gets the full complement. But what happens the first third down when they want somebody in the game to protect Trevor Lawrence?
Right.
What happens if they get to the 1 yard line? Who's the back that they trust to run directly into the hole and not bounce it outside? So I think like those two things give me a little bit of cause for concern on Etienne.
I agree, and I'm glad that you tap the brakes on Etienne as this passing game weapon, because first of all, as we're laying out, you have Evan Ingram, you have Christian Kirk, you have Zay Jones, who they spent a decent amount of money on. You have Marvin Jones, who's still probably the number 1 target in the red zone. And how is exactly it going to work out so that Etienne, who, as you correctly pointed out, and Jay Moyer did some good stuff on this too. The people that watch him, ETN is not a polished route runner. ETN is not somebody that has multifaceted ways to attack the pass defense. He certainly can work in space, and like you said, he has the history with Trevor Lawrence. And I agree with your skepticism on Christian Kirk. He's the number one by contract, the same way that Corey Davis was number one for the Jets. I think nobody is expecting Corey Davis to get more targets than Elijah Moore. I know there's no Elijah Moore on Jacksonville's team, but my point is that that is information maybe about aspirations. Christian Kirk is a speed slot. He's not really an outside receiver. His big plays with the Cardinals were more downfield plays set up by Kyler Murray's mobility. So we'll see. And I keep cautioning myself because I get excited, Heath. I'm an emotional fantasy football player, and I get really excited. And as soon as we had Brian Dable hired, as soon as we had anybody hired in Chicago, as soon as we had Doug Peterson, I want to be excited about these offenses. Mike McDaniel, but it may not be until week 6, week 8 that we really start to see things settle in, so that we see the benefits of going from these sleepwalking offenses to actual functional offenses. But going with the emotional angle, since we're on the couch, it's about emotions too. But tell me something, take off your hat as a fantasy football analyst for a second, and just tell me something that you're excited as a football fan to see in the big reveal coming up starting Thursday through Monday night.
Yeah, I'll stay with the emotions, and I've got the Mahomes Magic Crunch over my shoulder here, and
Yeah.
like not just Mahomes, but I'm really, really excited to see Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill, Aaron Rodgers without Davante Adams, and then the flip side of those as well, because both those wide receivers went to quarterbacks who we don't think are as talented, although Tyreek Hill will tell you that Tua is the most accurate passer in the NFL. Like, I really think, and we will overblow this in terms of like maybe we'll get a wide receiver doesn't matter discussion if Aaron Rodgers turns out to be QB1 again. But I'm really interested to see how these offenses function in Kansas City in particular. It's so interesting how they spent that money they did on MVS, the draft capital they did on Sky Moore. Juju's the only wide receiver they have who's ever actually commanded a large target share. And you just wonder, are they going to throw the ball to Travis Kelce 130 times and then everybody else, it's going to be a pick and choose kind of thing? Or will there be a number one wide receiver on a consistent basis? The way they functioned in the preseason, it looked like Juju and MVS are full-time players. Mecole Hardman is the number 3, and Sky Moore's battling Justin Watson to be the number 4. Now, I would expect a couple weeks in, if Sky Moore develops, because I did think he was pretty raw coming out, and he's only played wide receiver for 3 years. So it might just take a while, but it looks like it's Juju and MVS. I don't know how long that'll be the case. And then in Green Bay, it might just be Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are the leading running backs and the leading receivers.
Yes. I think that, well, let's take the Chiefs first. I know they're near and dear to your heart. And I think that you nailed it first, because I remember this offense cup runneth over. So we had Kelce, we had Hill, and we always wanted to produce a third guy.
Yes.
Occasionally, and maybe that's a simpler answer too, is you didn't mention Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but we're still waiting basically from the moment they drafted him for him to take the passing game role that we saw him have with Joe Burrow back at LSU, which we thought was one of the reasons they drafted him so high. But there was never that third option that would emerge. Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, whoever. It never really clicked. And I wonder if perhaps there isn't going to be a consistent second option. Now, I know folks are drafting Juju Smith-Schuster like he's going to be that guy. And I guess it makes sense that Juju's going to be the layup, right? I mean, that's if he's functioning as the slot receiver and he still uncovers pretty well, he's going to be the layup. And I think maybe that's why he was going around guys. Heath, I'm just going to be honest. I wasn't even thinking about taking Juju when he went off the board. Right? I mean, you're closer to Kansas City, at least paying closer attention than I am. Do you think that his ADP maybe got a little bit over optimistic?
I mean, last I saw it was around 6, round 7 range, and I'm okay with it there. When he sneaks into round 5, I don't have a lot of interest. Right. And he does go there sometimes. I think what happens, especially in best ball, If you have Mahomes, then you want to stack that up with Kelsey and his number one wide receiver. Or if you're in these high stakes tournaments and you think, well, where do I find high upside in round 5? How about Patrick Mahomes, number one wide receiver? He's such a strange case because we've never really seen somebody be as good as he was those first 2 years in the league and then be this afterwards. And he's not even the same type of player. He had a 97-yard catch 2 years in a row. He was making big plays, and then he turned into a tight end. And you see him in Kansas City, and he looks almost like a tight end. So I'm mystified kind of by the whole situation. What I will say is I think the Chiefs have a better number 2, a better number 3, a better number 4 wide receiver than they've had at any point in the last few years.
And they have ways that these guys can contribute, right? I think they finally figured out last year that, well, maybe McCall Hardman doesn't need to be a wide receiver. Maybe he can do some Deebo Samuel kind of things, get him the ball with him momentum going forward behind the line of scrimmage, all kinds of different things. Obviously, Valdez-Scantling is going to be your field stretcher, force the safety to honor the deep pass. And Sky Moore, like you said, under construction. I will say this, if Juju Smith-Schuster's knee is a problem, and it certainly could be, then maybe it's Sky Moore who can get into some of those layup throws. But this also, again, and you expect Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon is a guy, he's going to matter for fantasy at some point this year, right? I mean, there's going to be some weeks that we recommend it's a good week to start Jerick McKinnon.
I would say probably Jerick McKinnon is the guy who kind of crushed the hope that I had for Clyde. There was a point this offseason when they had Ronald Jones, and I got really too excited about both Ronald Jones and Clyde, which, I mean, we've all done that over the last 3 years, basically, because I thought they're going to give the ball to Ronald Jones in between the tackles and not ask him to do anything else, and he's going to do very good at that. And they're going to play Clyde, as you mentioned, what he did in college, and they're going to just let him do that. And I thought it would work out really well for both of them. Now that they've re-signed McKinnon and the way they used in the preseason, I think McKinnon might just be the third down back week 1.
Yeah.
And so I think the way that he matters for fantasy is if they finally just kind of give up on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, or if he suffers another injury, which he's had a bunch of them his first 2 years, and you've got a situation where Pacheco is actually the lead back on early downs, then we'll see even more of McKinnon, I think.
So McKinnon's messing this up. But week to week, and the other thing that we saw was actual rational coaching last year when teams took away the deep ball and they went to 2 high safeties. They really evolved to take what the defense gave them. It doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes. You don't have to. In the first half of the season, I forget who it was that said it, Heath, but they said it was like he was trying to score 21 points on every play.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's good, though. I mean, this is why I'm confident. I'm more confident in my Philadelphia players. This is why I'm more confident in Detroit Lions, because you have offensive coaching staffs that have shown they will actually process what's happening and validly act to update things in light of new information. So with Patrick Mahomes, I think, like you said, will his number 2, will there even be a clear number 2? Will that number 2 be consistent? You mentioned Juju real quick. I want to go back to something you said about Juju's first 2 years and what's happened since then, because he also came into the league really young, right? I wonder about the knee, and I said this on Rich Rebar show earlier this morning. Occam's razor kind of dictates if he's not getting a long-term contract, and we know that he has this knee issue on and off, isn't that the most likely explanation? Not right. Twitch or TikTok or whatever it is that he's doing that people wanted to focus on. And they did it. And someone brought up an incentive-laden contract, right? Because his contract was reported as like 1 year, $2.5 million. Wow, that's a lot less than what did Valdez-Scantling, like 3 years, $30 million, something like that.
Kind of.
But Juju's contract actually has very attainable as incentives that gets him up to 8-9 million right away.
Oh yeah.
But then again, Heath, you gotta do the deductive reasoning. Well, why wouldn't they just give him an $8 or $9 million contract then? Right?
They're not sure he can play that many games.
They're not sure he can get to 65 catches or 55 catches, right? They're easily attainable incentives. So for most starting slot receivers, right? Like the Raiders didn't structure Hunter Renfro's contract that way. They didn't say $16 million as long as you catch 80 balls. He just got $16 million a year up front. So I think there's reason to tap the brakes on Smith-Schuster. And hey, don't forget Justin Watson, by the way. Justin Watson's there. And go ahead, say something about that, because I know, again, you're following this stuff.
Yeah. I think what we've seen, like Watson was playing ahead of Moore through most of the preseason, or right there with him, kind of rotating in and out. And actually, it was strange. I don't know if, I mean, it's preseason, so you never know if they're just trying to see, can this guy do this? Can this guy do that? Wait, let's work on this. What we saw a lot of was MVS running slants and running short, like 5 and 10 yard routes, and Juju playing outside, and Sky Moore and Justin Watson as the guys taking the top off of the defense. I don't know if I would assume that Juju's going to predominantly play slot. I mean, he's going to play, obviously, when there's 2 wide receivers on the field, he'll be one of them, so he might not be in the slot then. But yes, Justin Watson earned rave reviews from Patrick Mahomes at OTAs.
Yeah.
And there's been nothing that's changed that throughout the preseason.
He's extremely athletic. He was toiling at the end of that Tampa Bay depth chart, and a few times it looked like he was going to get his head above water and have a chance to do something. Never really built on that. But in these uncertain situations, Heath, in these situations where we're saying, again, doing projections is so great because it keeps you honest and it makes you run the numbers. Like you said, sometimes you look at it and you say, well, is this really what I believe is going to happen? Well, especially in week 1, we're really pulling numbers out of the air that manifest just beliefs. It's just all beliefs, really. And in this case, especially, it's not just even based on snaps or targets or projecting that. It's based on what's going to work, what's actually going to click whenever, other than Travis Kelce, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Mecole Hardman are kind of in unknown territory with this pass offense. You mentioned the Packers. And again, Keith, I love it that when you're just saying, you introduce these things and you just say, it could be this or all these other questions. But I think you nailed it, Heath. I really think you did. Because the simplest way, I forget who it was that I saw on Twitter say, what if the Green Bay offense is going to crash? It can't crash. It's crash proof. I don't think Davante Adams was really a key to this offense. I don't think, I mean, we have the 7 games that Rodgers played without him, and the team was fine. Rodgers was fine. Rodgers' fantasy numbers were fine. The offense was fine. But also, this team is an offensive line and running game based offense. And then you also have a Hall of Fame quarterback who can fill in all the cracks. And you said maybe it's just Jones and Dillon. I think Aaron Rodgers himself told us this. I saw someone, I think, ask us in the chat room already. I've gotten this question a lot over the last month. Is it okay to take Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon both on your team? Or another way to put it is, for those of us doing the projections, is it okay to have them both projected as top 20 running backs in week 1 against Minnesota?
I sure hope it's okay, because I just wrote about that this morning and told people that it's okay to take Aaron Jones in round 2, and I think it's okay to take A.J. Dillon in round 4, and I have them both in my top 20 for the full season and for week 1 against Minnesota. I think we'll see Aaron Jones challenged to be the leading pass catcher for Aaron Rodgers this year, and A.J. Dillon's going to have an opportunity to run the ball 12 to 15 times and catch a couple passes himself. I see no reason that Jones can't be a number 1 RB and Dillon can't be a number 2 running back. I don't mind even drafting both of them and starting both of them together. And this is the one place where I maybe go too far with it, but particularly in week 1, in tournaments, I don't know that I do this in cash games, but I don't mind playing them both in the same DFS lineup. That's ridiculous to play 2 running backs from the same team. But I have no problem imagining an upside where these 2 guys combine for 250 yards and 8 catches and score 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. Week in, week out. And then they trade how it gets divided up, because they're both really good. They're both good in the passing game. Aaron Jones should lead the team in catches, I would guess. If there's some sort of prop about leading Green Bay in receptions, I would take Aaron Jones in that. And we'll see about Allen Lazard. That's something we need to know, but we just don't know. We don't even know what his injury is right now. And I suppose, Heath, maybe you would even still go with both of them in a tournament if Lazard doesn't play. Maybe that's the answer. And because it seems so against conventional wisdom, that's why it's all about those low ownership percentages, right?
Absolutely.
There'll be a low ownership percentage. And again, Rodgers himself told us the best 11 is when both of them are on the field.
And I think people like you may get an ownership. I mean, people do amazing work now projecting what the ownership's going to be on Sunday
Right? Like
morning,
project what I'm
Saturday
going to eat
night.
breakfast for breakfast tomorrow. They probably can, right?
Like we'll know pretty well, and you might see, oh, Aaron Jones is projected to be like the 6th most popular running back, and AJ Dillon's like the 20th. But that's not it. It's how many people are going to play Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon together, and
Mm-hmm.
that number is minuscule.
Yeah, and I think that we've gone off on the DFS tangent here, but the idea is that there, especially for week one, there's nothing too outlandish, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing. One of the things I've been trying to hit on my show a lot lately is all of us are going to be really wrong about, I don't know, 40% of
Yeah.
things, and our first big clue is going to be week one. And I've been making the comparison between the offensive lineman who gives up the sack and then recovers the fumble, right? So,
Yeah.
you identify the stuff you're really wrong about because you're so committed. Because I like the way you put it. Because you're, I think Heath, we're kindred souls, at least
Oh
on
yeah.
it. We're gentle. Like we're not out here to pound on the table and scare people into listening to us or something like that. I hope it's okay because I've been advising people that it is okay, and because you have that receptiveness to, okay, I'm open to being wrong, you can be, I've been saying this too, that it's more important to realize, especially now that we've turned the page, if your draft is over, it's more important to be the first one to realize you were wrong than to be right, because that's what's going to allow you to adjust and make the correct adjustments. Go ahead.
Well, and I think one of the difficult things for people, especially with the guys who are on your bench, those last 5 or 6 draft picks, is knowing like which of these guys are okay to decide I was wrong after a
Mm-hmm.
week or two, and which of these guys am I drafting thinking I'm not going to drop them for a month, and even if things look bleak, because I believe in this person and the combination of this person and their situation. I think of like a lot of these young wide receivers,
Yes.
particularly the rookies. We have so many rookies available after round 10 in fantasy drafts this year that are first and second round picks that I really like. And some of those guys I don't think is going to get off to a very good start. Sky Moore is one of them.
Right.
I don't know that Garrett Wilson's going to be a full-time player in week one, and he was the number 10 pick in the draft. Those are the types of guys I want to make sure that, like, because there were people who dropped AJ Brown his rookie year, and there were people who dropped Justin Jefferson his rookie year. Those are the guys that even if week one looks like you were wrong, just say, well, I wasn't drafting him for week one. I'm going to hold on for a while.
Yeah, Drake London came up. I think I told folks, I mean, he's probably going to see a lot of Marshawn Lattimore. He hasn't been on a field in a month. If he goes off on your bench, you're happy. That's the prescription for some players in week one. Put him on your bench, and if he goes off, right? Like, look at the Rams backfield. What's the right? Is there? I'll just tee this one up for you this way. Heath, is there a Rams running back worth starting on Thursday night?
I would really hope that I don't have to. My problem is that I did draft a few players that may not be full speed for week one, because I believe in J.K. Dobbins and I believe in Chris Godwin. And I think when those guys in the second half of the season are going right, they could make your team very difficult to deal with. So if I have a few of those guys, then I might have to. I would lean towards Cam Akers. What I do not totally believe is Sean McVay saying that I have 2 starting running backs, because most of the evidence supports the fact that one running back each game gets 16 plus touches in a Sean McVay offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that will be Cam Akers. I'm not sure that will be week one.
Right. There's Akers missing practice. Henderson is the one that it makes sense for them to have total clarity. He should just never get more than 12 or 15 touches in a week.
Right.
They're going to wear him out. And then there's Kyron Williams, who they actually kept in bubble wrap after he broke his foot, saying he's going to have a big role. And maybe we could have an ugly 3-headed backfield. And you said you've already done your projections. And look, projections, rankings, all these things that we do as fantasy content purveyors, you go back and you can't step in the same river twice, right? And you give this afternoon, I'm going to change it. And then tomorrow morning, I'm going to change it again and leading up to game time. However, that being said, since you mentioned those 2 players, because these are really good players for the folks under that heading of what you need to know for week one. So let's start with J.K. Dobbins. And it can be strictly by your projections, or it can be feel. And that's honestly one of the things about playing having enough teams is it's a check where you can say in a vacuum, this is how I'm going to project these offenses and players. But then, oh, well, my projections say I should start J.D. McKissic over J.K. Dobbins. Am I really going to do that? So let's start with Dobbins, assuming we don't learn anything more and we go into the game just knowing he's going to be active and nothing else. We don't get some specific piece of information or a quote or something that we can hang our hat on. About how low on your list do you go for running backs to start over J.K. Dobbins?
Yeah, that will be a tough decision, and it will my Sunday morning answer may be different than my Tuesday afternoon answer for sure. I'm not currently projecting Dobbins. So I've got Drake and Davis and maybe Justice Hill kind of chopping it up. But I think J.D. McKissic's a good name to say because it's not just Gibson that gets a boost from this situation. Like it's just the two of them now. And there's an opportunity for McKissic to probably receive 10 to 12 touches. I would start McKissic over Dobbins in week one. Right. Is what I'm saying right now.
Yeah. Well, no, there's even some running backs. So I think where we get to, and this is where I'm going to introduce a new feature. I think this is normally going to be maybe during the Waiver show or our preview, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce it now to piggyback on this conversation. We have a new segment for you here in 2022.
It's time for the Sleeper of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
Makes me want to kick a freestyle rhyme or two, but then I would embarrass all of us. The Sleeper of the Week. And the Sleeper is the player that you wouldn't normally start. I mean, there's so many definitions for sleepers, right? During draft season, sleeper, it's someone nobody's thinking about. During the season, it's a player that you didn't necessarily draft to start or you wouldn't expect to start, but there you are checking the check marks in your lineup and you're going to start him. J.D. McKissic's a great one. In a similar vein, my Sleeper of the Week. And I hope that eventually I'm going to be able to retire this player from the sleeper status. It's Nyheim Hines. And I think the excitement here about Nyheim Hines, again, is that reveal when the coaches tell us, the coach specifically in this case, I would take this player in fantasy. That was months ago that Frank Reich said that about Hines. And then every report successively is, yes, Nyheim Hines has a bigger role in the offense. Yes, Nyheim Hines is running routes out of the slot. And you have that intersecting with Matt Ryan, who from all reports is making this look like an NFL offense, that the receivers, the ball's coming out on time and the ball arrives where it's supposed to arrive. And even onlookers, beat writers saying, wow, there's actual timing and crispness to these play designs. And that, to me, also speaks out to Nyheim Hines. So I think Nyheim Hines is a player that I honestly, Heath, even if J.K. Dobbins had played in the preseason, I'm so excited to see what Hines is going to do. I want it to be in my lineups this week as opposed to, say, Drake London, where I say, hey, if he goes off on your bench, that's good. What do you think about Hines as the sleeper of the week?
Yeah, I've actually got him in full PPR ranked ahead of Devin Singletary. So I am right there with you. He was one of my sleepers in draft season. I mean, you can look at his career, and the whole odd year, even year thing is funny. I think the first one I remember doing that was Brett Saberhagen back in the 80s. But he had, what was it, 4 years ago now with Andrew Luck, he caught 63 passes, had a very good season. Then Jacoby Brissett starts the next year. Nyheim Hines goes in the tank. Then he gets Phillip Rivers, captain, check down. He catches 63 passes. And then he has Carson Wentz the next year, and he goes in the tank. And so now he's back with Matt Ryan. I think we're in for a 60 or 70 catch performance. The thing I was really encouraged by, and I don't want to make too much out of this, but I think we talk about Kareem Hunt and these guys Tony Pollard, guys that you can flex if the starter stays healthy. And if something happens to the starter, they become a league winner. I haven't really viewed Hines as that kind of guy in the past. It always seemed like there was somebody else they'd probably use predominantly on early downs if something happened to the starter. I liked his preseason usage with the first team. It was just Hines. And there's not really anybody on the roster that I think is going to take a large share. Like, I don't know if they give him 25 touches, but a large share of the early downs. I do think that he has more potential upside in the case of an injury than he did in the past. And he's a good flex right now.
He's maybe Austin Eckler if Jonathan Taylor goes down, as far as a role where, no, you're not going to run him into the ground. They got Deion Jackson, who they kept, who they like, I think, for special teams as much as anything else. And then Phillip Lindsay did make it back to the practice squad. So, but the thing is, I would say if Taylor goes down, you pencil more of an Eckler, Kelly, or whoever, maybe at least Sonny Michel split. And you're right, looking at the usage, how they're using him in all those situations. He's just a good football player. So Naeem Hines, maybe we won't be calling him a sleeper for that much longer. Michael Carter, maybe not a league winner part of it, but I think is another one that you can say that he has flex value as it is. He's the starter, right? Again, we would call him a sleeper, but he's the running back that's out there the first series, and he's already demonstrated he's a good player. Maybe Breece Hall should be the guy that we've been calling a sleeper. And that's one of the really fun things about week one. And again, this is implicated in these lineup decisions where we've spent this draft capital on a player. You spent a 4th round pick on Breece Hall. You spent an 11th round pick on Michael Carter. How could Carter be a better week one start? Well, that's just how it goes. Go ahead.
No, that situation in particular pains me. Not just Breece Hall, but also Garrett Wilson, because it seems he's still maybe stuck behind Corey Davis. And I would like for that to end as soon as possible. Michael Carter was good last year when he played. I think Breece Hall is a different thing altogether. And I would love to see Breece Hall get the opportunity to be a lead back with Carter in a helping role. But I do agree with you. I think in week one, if I had both of them, I don't have any teams where I do, I would have to lean towards Carter in full PPR. It seems like they're going to make Hall take the job from Carter in game action. I expect, like, if you drafted Breece Hall, I would not be panicking, because I don't think it's going to take too long before Hall takes that job. He's a very good running back. But for now, yeah, Carter's a high-end flex.
We'll see what happens with the Jets too. I don't want to say I hope that the Jets beat the Ravens, but I think if the Jets beat the Ravens with Joe Flacco quarterback, it just makes each successive week's decision a little more interesting with the Jets.
They're not done with Zach Wilson yet. He might sneak him in this week. I don't know why.
Well, that's what they're saying. Yeah. Well, what's funny is it sure seems like from the outside looking in, and Cecil has hinted at this, that maybe not everybody in the building is backing Zach Wilson for the Jets organization.
Well, I would assume the pass catchers are not. What did Garrett Wilson say? Joe
Flacco's ball is more catchable. He said, I'll just say it's more catchable.
Yes.
So, this is shades of all the Alabama receivers saying they prefer Mac Jones to Tua Tagovailoa. It reminded me, weren't you in insurance sales? Wasn't that your job before?
I was insurance sales. We had the Farm Bureau Fantasy Football Show.
Right.
You were the first ever guest on it.
Yeah, and I feel like they're trying to do a sales job on us with Tua. Right? It feels like they're really trying to sell us Tua, and Teddy's still there. So going back to this idea about draft capital and starting players, and I like also, I think you and I can riff on this, Heath, as we do our projections every week, and the projections stand for a belief, especially in week one. And I like how you articulated, I don't have J.K. Dobbins projected right now, and to me what that means is I won't affirmatively project him to have statistics until there's new information, and if there's no new information, then that's where he's going to stay. How does that idea apply to Chris Godwin?
The new information that I needed was that Chris Godwin was practicing without his brace on his knee. I don't know for sure if that's enough information to say he's playing for sure. I am currently projecting him, which makes it difficult. And it's one of those situations where projections really fail us. And they did it last year with Tampa Bay as well, because we were looking at Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Antonio Brown, and we said, unless Tom Brady throws 750 times, I don't know how all these guys can be good. And then Tom Brady threw 750 times. But now we've got two more, Russell Gage and Julio Jones. If there was no Godwin, then I would have Gage and Jones up in that high-end flex range. With Godwin, it kind of makes a mess of things. I'm viewing him as a flex. I will probably start Chris Godwin if he plays, just because they've talked enough about how they recognize the second half of the season is more important than the first half. I can't imagine they're running Godwin out there if they don't think he's okay.
Yes. I don't know why I feel like I want to make that quotable. There is no Godwin. There is no Godwin. No, but I think when Chris Godwin says, I don't know if I'm going to play, we're thinking more about the second half of the season. He's telling us everything he can tell us without just coming out and saying it. So I think even if we do see Godwin, we might see finish snap count. I think Julio Jones has to be on a pitch count. Has to be. I don't know how you sign Julio Jones. It's malpractice. And then you to not put him on some sort of pitch count and have him in more high leverage situations. Not that might actually be better for fantasy overall than if he was playing 50 snaps or 55 snaps, to be honest. And then you have Russell Gage. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you want Julio Jones for the playoffs, it does not make a lot of sense to play him a lot of snaps now. And they seem to love Russell Gage when he was healthy.
Yes.
Now, is he 100% right now? We don't really know that either. Maybe the answer is just that Mike Evans is the top 5 wide receiver this week.
Which is way back in like June, what I thought Mike Evans was going to do. He had his own hamstring issue that he seems to be over. It's going to be interesting. I'm afraid that we might have to have an injury to one of these guys to really clarify this. But at the same time, 3 top 13 PPR receivers on a points per game basis came out of this offense, which again is one of those things like we're talking about Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, right? Like, whoa, can there be 2 top 20 running backs? Yes.
Right.
I mean, can there be 3 on a points per game basis? Again, now if Antonio Brown had played the whole year, not missed any time, maybe it might not have been 3 to top 13, but still, go ahead.
But yeah, but there's no Gronk now either.
Right.
So, like, there might be enough touchdowns unless Kyle Rudolph's turning into Gronk, and I've had visions of Kyle Rudolph turning into Gronk, but
right.
I don't think it's probably going to happen.
No. So we know that Tom Brady's going to throw a lot. We know that much. The other thing we're going to be watching there on Sunday night, Tampa Bay and Dallas. You know, there were a couple of games when Rich and I got together this morning. We were previewing some of the games, and I think there are some games that are going to be letdowns for fantasy. And I feel like the Tampa Dallas game is going to be a letdown. I feel like it's. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I thought you were going to. I kind of feel like Thursday night's game is going to.
Yes,
be a letdown.
that one too.
Yes, I think that, like, and those island games do that to us often, and I think we just notice it more because there's no other football to distract us. But I don't know. I'm really interested in just learning a couple of things from that Sunday night game. Most notably, like, does Jerry still run the offense? Because if he does, Zeke's touching the ball 20 times, even against the best run defense in the league. And then also, I'm really excited to see Jalen Tolbert playing full speed football against an NFL defense, because I do think that there's an underrated chance that he's just better than we think he is. Small school guy who has just dominating performances, and the Cowboys liked him. They've got a pretty good eye for wide receivers. So I'm looking forward to see what he does specifically.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing Tony Pollard and whether there's something to him having that outsized role. And you're right to invoke Jerry. And I think invoking Jerry should give us enough reason to always pick the under or fade the Cowboys or feel like they're going to be underachievers, right?
Yep.
I mean, you have offensive line issues with the Cowboys. Left tackle is going to be a turnstile. Now, maybe Jason Peters, he's on the practice squad right now. I don't know if he's going to be ready to play, but, you know, you're facing Joe Tryon, Shoinka, and Shaq Barrett. I think it's going to be a problem. They don't have we'll see about Terrence Steele. You don't have the players that strike the fear in defenses now that you had last year. And the last time we saw Dak Prescott, he just wasn't inspiring. He wasn't uplifting the offense.
Well, and I think we have a question to be answered, and most fantasy analysts, and including myself based on the rankings, I guess, have just acted like the question's already been answered. But how does CeeDee Lamb function in this situation where he's being asked to kind of be a Cooper Kupp type of offense carrier, because he's not been that yet?
Well, will he even be asked to do that? Because I feel like, and I like Dak Prescott. I root for Dak Prescott to succeed. I do feel like he's been a bit on the robotic side in the way that he processes and makes decisions. And that could just be that he's been a good student and he's really absorbed, don't turn the ball over, you know, make safe decisions. And it was only whenever their defense was so bad that they were behind big at halftime that we really saw a barnstorming Dak Prescott. Because I almost feel like the best case scenario for CeeDee Lamb this year, Heath, is a disaster. It's like a 5-12 team where he and Dak and Lamb just have to do this pitch and catch game, and they could do that. But if Dak is allowed to play within the structure of the offense, like you said, Zeke's going to carry the ball 20 times. And so the point is, when we're projecting the Cowboys, we're in Jerry Jones' head, and that's a scary place to be.
Yes.
And then with Tampa, their offensive line is another issue too. They've had backups become starters, and then the starters go down, and now you have backups to backups. So we'll see. And their interior line is banged up, and the Cowboys have a few talented players on their defensive line. So I think that's why I project that one as a letdown. The Bills and the Rams, the Rams have Bobby Wagner now, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey. Things get a little tighter for the Bills. There's a lot of things exciting to see there. With Matthew Stafford, we have the elbow. Everything having to do with elbow, and they've had some turnover on their offensive line. Well, and I think in general, favor the defenses over the offenses the first
this week.
Yeah.
Well, I think there were 7 teams with an implied total in the teens this week, so that's not a particularly exciting weekend. But I do wonder if that Bills offense, because it does sound like there may have been some sort of disagreement between Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll. And I just wonder if they are planning on maybe changing things just a little bit, if the running backs are going to be a little bit more involved than they have been in the past. They made such an effort to get J.D. McKissick, had him taken away from him at the last second, and then drafted James Cook. I'm really curious because, we've got Stephon Diggs. Everybody thinks he's going to see 160 targets, and Gabe Davis is the breakout candidate this season. Isaiah McKenzie's become the sleeper candidate this season, and Dawson Knox is a top 8 tight end. It'll be interesting to see if all those things can actually happen.
You're right for folks to be open to the idea of some change in offensive philosophy. And I'll even admit to yada-ing Brian Daboll going and Ken Dorsey, whatever. It's Josh Allen's offense. But you never know. And again, it's being open to this information and coding some things. Since I didn't get to have you on during the preseason, some drafts left. Maybe everyone's drafted already, but maybe this is just a chance for people to pat themselves on their back and say, Heath agrees with me. Who were a few of your pet players, few players that you were not taking as we were going through draft season?
Yeah, I've got my little my spreadsheet here of I keep track of my most drafted players because, I do those things. DJ Moore, 100% was my most drafted player, the guy I'm most excited about, and the guy I think who could be a top 5 wide receiver, kind of in the Stephon Diggs type breakout type situation. Baker Mayfield is not an elite quarterback, but compared to everyone else that DJ Moore's played with, except I always like to make an exception on that because I don't want to say bad things about Teddy. Between the 20s, I'm not sure there's an enormous difference between Baker and Teddy. It's just Teddy never takes any chances close to the goal line, and so he always has a 3% touchdown rate. DJ Moore's scored a fourth of the Bills' touchdowns over the past, or the Panthers' touchdowns over the past 3 seasons in the passing game. They just haven't thrown more than 17 touchdown passes in 3 years. I would not be surprised if he doubles his career high in touchdowns. Running backs, Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
Tony Pollard. I have a lot of Mark Andrews and Evan Ingram at tight end. Like those are lower end. I took a lot of Jahan Dotson. That combination of speed and maybe the best hands in the class, and then all that extra time. And it's kind of that way with George Pickens as well. Those 2 rookies, because of either contract holdouts or injuries, got so much time with their new quarterbacks that didn't have any rapport built with anyone else because it's their first time with the team. And so I think both of those guys have a chance to be the number 1 rookie wide receiver.
Yeah, rookies, big week 1 reveals. And I like your optimism about Moore. It has to get better, right? It has to get better. You watch a player, I think as football watchers, and certainly when you add the extra lens as a fantasy player, especially as a fantasy content creator, there are players you identify and you know that where their fantasy value is falling short of expectations, it's not because of anything that's under their control. So when some of the things that aren't under their control change, coaching, quarterbacks, offensive line, what have you, then it's reasonable to say there's going to be a bump up, and we don't know how big that bump up is going to be. Look what happened for Cooper Kupp when he got a new quarterback, right? Now, go ahead.
And I hope, the beat writer reports are negative enough to have kept me lukewarm on him. but I've still drafted a lot of them. I hope that's the case with David Montgomery, because I just see a guy who seems to need to avoid 3 tacklers every time he touches the ball just to get back to the line of scrimmage, and half the time he does it. He's a guy who I wish could just get into a good situation one year. He's earned it.
Maybe it'll be next year in free agency. But,
Yeah, could be.
Well, and this isn't taking anything away from Montgomery, but Khalil Herbert as a runner was just as good as Montgomery, maybe even a little better than Montgomery last year. And that's where the new regime comes in. There's so many different new regimes. What do they think of the players? How are they going to deploy the players? We learned this and more, but now we get to go off the rails and just talk about whatever. I guess what I want to ask you first, Heath, because our stories are intertwined. I can remember first bringing you on the recap team, et cetera, Destiny, and so on. And it's been a while, like we talked about before we went on the air. It's been a while since you've got this full-time gig with CBS, and you've ran some laps around the stadium now. Like you've got some experience, some good mileage. What about being a fantasy sports expert surprised you the most? What was something, now that you actually have had this experience doing this for a number of years, that maybe caught you off guard?
The first thing for sure was the camera. And we're in front of a camera now, but this is even a little bit different. Like the big camera. I went in for my first interview and they put me on a set and wanted me to talk about 3 guys, and I'd never sat on a set or sat in front of a big camera. And I was really terrible at just talking into the camera and pretending like I was talking to someone else. That's something I really, and I don't think I ever knew how difficult that was. It's not.
So did you have a breakthrough? Like, do you feel good about where you're at now?
I feel good about everything except for when they have me do hits somewhere by myself. Like right now, I'm talking to you on a podcast, and it's okay if I just look down at my computer.
Yeah.
And I'm not. But when they want me to be on a hit somewhere by myself, and I'm just talking into the camera, especially if it's like, just do 2 to 3 minutes on this. I could do that in my sleep if you would just take the camera away.
Yeah. Well, okay. So first, I want to ask you. So what got you over the hump for all the other ones? And got you comfortable in front of the camera?
I don't remember a secret sauce other than just repetition.
Reps. Yeah.
Just
sometimes that's all it
doing
is, right?
Yeah.
The first time I did a radio spot, I was terrified. I think it was in like Waterloo, Iowa, or something. I was terrified. And the camera, you're right that the camera brings you back to the ideas of like Native American. Like camera takes part of your soul or something, where it feels different. It's an observer. It's this odd stand-in observer. I think Errol Morris, the great documentary filmmaker, invented something where when you look at the camera, you see your own face like a mirror, or his face actually. So it's like a set of mirrors, so that he's actually sitting like next to you, but when you're looking right at the camera lens, you see his face. And it's part of the reason I think that his documentaries, the interview-based documentaries, are so immersive. I remember I was terrible on camera. We did our internet video stuff back in 2007, 2008. And this is more me really going on the couch when I talk about this, Heath. All I could think about was what I could do wrong. I could move my hands. I could make a weird face. I could do something weird with my eyebrow. I might look away. Mark Folletti, bless his soul, love you, Mark. He had to correct my shoulder tilt. I had a shoulder tilt that was so consistent that he knew the exact number of degrees to tilt the frame so that I wouldn't have this shoulder tilt. And all I could think about was all the different things that I could do wrong, which is no way to be genuine and really convey yourself in front of a camera. And I think sometimes you're right. There's no secret. It's just getting used to it. It's just reps. Tell me something cool that's happened because you work for CBS.
Oh, the coolest thing by far was the Super Bowl that was here in Miami, because it was the only time. That was the last real Radio Row, I think, that we've had. I don't know that maybe I wasn't at the most recent Super Bowl, so maybe they went back to the old style. But that week, we interviewed Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, like on set with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I always forget the rapper's name. So it was Old Town Road.
Mm-hmm. A Lil Nas X.
Yes. He came through with a posse, 30 deep, shirtless, walking by our set. And none of the football players even mattered in that place. Like, he just commanded the entire attention of the whole place. But that week, I got to hang out with Peter King and Gardner Minshew and drink beer. The Chiefs were there and won the Super Bowl. That week was definitely the best week.
Right? Like you want to call your mom and say, "Thanks for having me, Mom." It's because otherwise I never would have got to experience this. And are you still living in Florida? Is that right? You moved to Florida. I remember you moved to Florida when you first got the job. Are you still living in Florida?
Still living still in the same house that I bought
Wow.
when we moved here. So we're not. I don't think we're going anywhere.
No, I just went to the Mississippi Gulf Coast this weekend, the last little labor. I was really so pleasantly shocked, not even pleasantly surprised at how much of a good time we could have on all these different beaches. We drove down the coast. We saw the different communities, got to talk to some of the people, went to the James Booker Fest in Bay St. Louis. That's a whole other thing. And so I know, and then I've explored a little bit of Florida, not the Gulf Coast. We ended up evacuating about this time last year to Tallahassee. I'll just tell people to go to Wakulla Springs. But what part of Florida are you in?
I'm in South Florida. I'm about an hour north of Miami.
Okay.
30 minutes north of Fort Lauderdale. So yeah, we're 15, 20 minutes from the beach, depending on what time of day it is. And it's two-sided. One, it's so healing, especially during the season.
Mm-hmm.
If I can just go find an hour to sit at the beach and just breathe that air and listen to the waves. The other strange thing that's happened is like you have to get creative on vacations when you live that close to the beach, because in the past we pretty much just went somewhere to go to a beach for vacation.
Right.
This year we went to Michigan because my wife wanted to get away from humidity. She
Right
wanted to
on.
go somewhere where it was not.
It actually was hot. We were up there. We go up there every year. We were up there in August, and it was actually hot and humid.
We went in July, and it was warm for most people. It was not very humid though, and it got down into the 60s a couple of nights. So
Where in Michigan did you all go?
we were in Grand Rapids.
Oh, right on. That's Founders. Love the Founders beer there.
We went to Founders. We went to New Holland. We went to Bells is just about an hour south of there. Went over to Lake Michigan. It was fantastic.
Lake Michigan. When we went and camped on the Lake Michigan side, and my wife was just shocked that there were actual waves. And this is nice. We went to Ludington, I think, and there was a great ice cream place. I can't remember the name, where they actually have the creamery as part of the ice cream place. And then it was really close to Grand Haven and Muskegon, the other state park. Michigan has amazing
we went over to
parks.
The dunes.
Giant,
huge, like 40, 50 feet high.
Yes, there's special dunes too. I'm pretty sure that the dunes on that Lake Michigan coast on Michigan are unique in the way that they're composed, and they migrate up the hills and things like that. But my stepson and my wife will always make fun of me because we hiked through the dunes in Ludington to get to a lighthouse, because there's lots of great lighthouses in Michigan too. And it was like always over the next dune, right? Oh, it's just right over the next dune. Oh, there's another dune. Right over the next dune. Oh, there's another dune. So they tell me they're never going to follow me into the sand dunes again. All right, if you say you did go to a beach before you lived in Florida, give me another one of your favorite beaches that you used to go to.
We went to the Outer Banks for one vacation, and that is just fantastic. It's we rented a house there with my parents and just had like 8 or 9 of us in the house and spent a week there. Loved the sand, loved the little communities, just driving up and down. Fantastic area.
Yeah, the beach is great. I'd see people talk about the beach. It's the end of the summer, and I finally got the beach a few years back. You know, it's where the water meets the land. It's like you said, the sound, the smells, the salt air, and it's where the finite meets the infinite. And it is always a good time to get to spend any time there to recharge. And it's a recharge. It's been too long. It's a recharge to spend time with you. I know we're all both so busy. We're all so busy. It's a recharge to spend time with everybody. You know Heath's work, Heath Cummings Sr. on Twitter at CBS. Check out everything they have going on there. It's an exciting time to be taking this journey with everybody, the shared experience. No matter how much the fantasy football world changes, the constant is that it always feels good to connect with all of y'all. And we appreciate the opportunity, the privilege to get to serve. And we're all going to be spending a lot of time together for the next 4 months. So I hope we can keep it enjoyable to you, because you deserve the best, because you're so classy.